What's going on, guys? It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. So I'm doing a 10-team PPR mock auction draft. This is the format for one of my biggest money leagues. I've got that draft tonight, actually, so I figured I'd just do a mock draft for you guys and then record it for you guys and show you guys how I'm really sort of trying to approach the strategy in a league that is like my highest stakes league, so you can really see exactly what I'm doing, especially when I'm putting my money where my mouth is, and thought it'd be pretty interesting for you guys as well. It'd be another one less time for me to practice before this last big draft here. So I know it's just coming off of a really big draft weekend for you guys. I hope you guys all had a really successful draft. If you guys haven't had your drafts yet and they're next weekend, hopefully this can help you guys get a little bit of strategy into it, really see how I sort of approach building my roster, and then hopefully you guys can dominate your drafts come this next weekend. So been a lot of fun starting a draft. I've done several of my drafts. I had 2 big drafts this last weekend. I've got 2 more coming up here, including the one tonight. So it's been a lot of fun. I'll try and keep you guys posted if you guys care about how my leagues go. But also thinking about doing a video where I sort of just rate your guys' rosters. So if I get enough submissions there, I'm happy to go through do a video where I just rate each other's teams, give you guys suggestions on how you could improve it as well, and sort of say where I might have went differently and stuff. So if you guys are interested in that, we could just get a couple comments. We get like I'll say 10 teams that people submit total. I'm happy to go make that video, and it'd be a fun video for me to make as well, sort of see which kind of teams you guys are putting together. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It looks like the draft is just starting here. That I always forget. My bad. So we got Justin Jefferson here. I just don't find myself really spending up on Justin Jefferson very often. I think that I don't generally like how my teams end up being built if I spend that much capital on a player. I'd be more inclined to consider it in a 3 wide receiver league, but in general, though, when you get to even those larger leagues, I think that's just something that I really want to be prioritizing, having a little bit of depth. I don't see myself really going after that all that often, and it's even really, I said in 3 wide receiver leagues it matters, but I also find that if I get into a 3 wide receiver league, I tend to sort of want to spread out the overall quality of my wide receivers. So if you're in like a really small league, then obviously the top tier talent becomes more valuable. If you're in an 8-team league, even a 10-team league, you can bump it up a little bit, make it a little bit more important, but it just doesn't quite check out for me the way I like how my rosters get built. So we saw Jefferson go for 68. That's pretty chalk here. It's actually a little bit more expensive than what you'd normally see, but it's more than I'm willing to pay for sure. Now I've got Austin Eckler coming up. He should be poised to have another really great season. I think he's a perfectly fine draft pick. It's just, again, another player that I don't see myself drafting very often, especially in auction formats. I find that I prefer the values that go much later. There are a lot of running backs, especially when I get to choose how much guys are going for. I love the values of guys like Jahmyr Gibbs, Ramondre Stevenson, even later, Miles Sanders, James Conner, Madison, Akers, Montgomery, Dobbins, all of those guys are really great picks for me, and it makes me feel like I can really confidently just sort of pass on this top tier running back and allocate a lot more of my budget towards wide receivers and even quarterback and tight end, especially in a PPR format where getting a lot of the top tier wide receivers is really valuable. So we're going to see Eckler go for probably about his pre-draft value here. It's funny how long it sometimes takes to see a player get up to their pre-draft value when we all know how much they're about to go for. It's just a lot of back and forth whether or not the people actually want to commit to paying that extra dollar. Just like that, we saw Banez almost get him. Then with 1 second left, we saw Team FS swoop in. So just sort of fun seeing all that banter going back and forth in auction drafts. Next up, we've got Jamar Chase here. Jamar Chase, another guy I think you could make a really strong case for arguing that he should be the wide receiver 1 being drafted. I still would be drafting Justin Jefferson ahead of him just because there's a little bit of concern surrounding the Joe Burrow injury. We really haven't heard much about it since it really occurred. He hasn't really practiced much so far and hasn't played in any of the preseason games, and I don't think I'm necessarily worried about it by any means, but it does mean that there's a world where the Bengals start a little bit slow, and any little differentiation between him and Jefferson is going to be enough to make me prioritize Jefferson over him. Next up, we've got Christian McCaffrey, another guy pretty much I view pretty much the same as Austin Eckler here, a guy that should be an elite fantasy asset. He's probably going to finish as a top 3 running back again this season if he can stay healthy. RB1 is most certainly in the cards for him as well this season, and he probably should be ranked that. I have him ranked as my running back 1 as well, and I think he's a really great draft pick. It's just not somebody that I find myself drafting all that often, just because, again, I like the roster construction if I miss out on these really high-end, high-expensive guys in auction drafts. So now we're seeing Cooper Kupp get nominated here. Kupp's been a guy that I've been kind of scared to draft so far this offseason, just a guy that I think carries a lot of risk associated with him, and I generally go by the rule of you can't win your league in your draft, but you can lose it, especially for these early picks, and Cooper Kupp seems like the kind of pick that could honestly cost you your league if he just busts or gets hurt again. The Rams could certainly implode, and it's a little bit concerning for me. In one of my 2 drafts I had yesterday, though, it was a 10-team league. I was picking at the 9 spot, and he made it back to me at pick 12. in round 2. That's where I picked him. I really just felt like I had to. I was torn on him at pick 9. I didn't do it. I ended up taking Nick Chubb there, but then seeing him in round 2 felt like an auto pick for me. So that's a round where I'm willing to start considering him. The end of round 1, the beginning of round 2 is where I feel more comfortable doing it. I would take him ahead of. He'd still be my fourth wide receiver off the board, probably ahead of guys like Stephon Diggs and Devontae Adams, but there are other running backs I'd take ahead of him. I'd obviously take Kelsey ahead of him, and then I would take McCaffrey, Eckler, Bijan, and Chubb all ahead of him, and I would consider Saquon as well in that. Speaking of Kelsey, here we see him get nominated here. Another guy that I do really think is going to have a fantastic season. He's obviously probably poised to be the tight end 1 again this year, but I just don't find myself drafting him very much either, unless I'm like at the back of the first round in a snake draft. I generally find that I'd like the value associated with getting Mark Andrews later, just a hell of a lot more. 41 is too cheap here for me, though. I can't let that happen. If I get him for 42, that's totally fine. But that's the thing with guys like Mark Andrews here. You see Mark Andrews, he's going for $21. Getting him for less than half the price of Travis Kelce just feels like something I want to do. Although 46 is a really great value on Kelce, I've got no problem if someone wanted to pay that. Tyreek Hill is another guy that I'd be super excited about this season. A guy that has a legitimate shot to finish as the wide receiver 1. There aren't very many wide receivers that you can really say that for, so Tyreek Hill being one does certainly make him extremely valuable. 38 is way too low. There we go. We're seeing things go up. It's always a bummer when you see guys in auction drafts go for below their pre-draft value when you're not one of the people getting them. It just makes it feel like you're missing out. But right here, if I can get him for 44, it feels like something I actually have to do. He's one of my top 3 wide receivers, and dang, that's a bummer. I really thought we were going to get him there. I'm not going to put myself in a bad spot here because I think A.J. Brown's a really close comparison, as well as Chris Olave. Both of those guys are guys that I really do target in PPR drafts right now, and guys that I am really going to try and get on my roster. So I don't want to go above and beyond to overpay for a guy when I know that I can get those guys for even cheaper later on. Bijan's another super exciting pick. He's got a legitimate shot to finish as the running back 1. I believe he comes in as my running back 4 or 5 in my rankings. I personally would probably take him 4th just behind Nick Chubb, so I'd go McCaffrey, Eckler, Chubb, and then Bijan. You can put Saquon there as well, but really if you want to take Bijan all the way up at the pick 101, no problem with it. He's got legitimate upside. He's a stud. He's going to be an awesome player, and honestly probably will be the number 1 overall player drafted in fantasy drafts next season, so I totally get drafting him and just sort of letting it ride there. He's the kind of guy that you see get bid up a little bit too much in auction drafts often. He's just one of those, high-end guys with a lot of high-profile guys, rookie. People are super excited about him. So this is where I'm nominating a guy that I do want to get. I don't normally recommend doing that, but when it's a guy that's going to dictate what your decision-making process is, I think it makes sense to draft them a little bit earlier, nominate them earlier, just so you can get that piece of information. See if you know whether, because if I know I'm going to get A.J. Brown, it makes it easier for me to decide what I'm doing going forward as to where I'm not going to go any higher here. I don't want to overpay too much, but I'm willing to overpay just a little bit for a guy that I'm super high on. Seeing him get out of hand here, that is something that happens a little bit if you do nominate guys early. It's a little bit upsetting when that kind of thing happens, but it's good to know that I'm not going to get him, and it means that I should be targeting guys like Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams, that I am still high on, and guys that I just don't necessarily want to get. But I generally find that my roster builds are best when I get 2 wide receivers, 2 stud wide receivers, and being able to do that and knowing that I'm going to have to target the other guys rather than waiting because I wanted to get A.J. Brown is going to be really useful here. Here's Saquon. Like I said, he's my running back 4 or 5 in my rankings. I don't remember exactly where. He's going to have a really solid season. He's going to catch a ton of passes. He's going to be the focal point of this Giants offense, and I've got no problem drafting him. He doesn't really excite me just because, for whatever reason, I'm a little bit concerned about the Giants offense. I think they could be a team that does underperform this season, and it's just a little bit scary for me. I don't really find myself drafting him in many places, but I don't really have a strong argument against doing so. I think he's a perfectly fine draft pick. Like I said, he's just not somebody that I find myself targeting. I don't think he really moves the needle for me too much. I would put him in a tier below those top 3 guys, and probably the top 4. I think Chubb, CMC, Eckler, and Bijan can all finish as the running back 1 this season, and for whatever reason, I don't really think Saquon can do that this year, so he definitely falls a tier below those guys, and it just makes it the kind of player that I don't find myself drafting very much. Nick Chubb is a guy that's super exciting. I'd love to get him on a lot of my teams. I think he's going to be a guy that could easily finish as the running back 1 this season. Like I said, I think he's one of the best values at the running back position as well, and he's just he's a stud. I think he's going to be a really quality asset for your rosters, and I'm willing to pay about pre-draft value for him. I don't want to go over, especially at this point in the draft where there's still a lot of good players on the board. I find myself not putting myself in a position where I overpay because there will be guys that I can get a value later, and don't want to put myself in a spot where I wish I waited and got a different guy for way cheaper. Here we get Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry's a guy that I think in a lot of drafts you will see go for significantly below that pre-draft value. I had a league yesterday where he went for like $20 less than his pre-draft value, and I was actually interested at that point. He's not a guy that I found myself drafting very often, but there is some very real risk associated with drafting him. He's 29 years old. He's on what could very easily be a dumpster fire of an offense, and it's just a little bit concerning. So I totally see why he ends up going below pre-draft value sometimes. In this draft, he's obviously not. So if he goes anywhere near his pre-draft value, he's not someone I'm touching. Sort of in the same vein as that Cooper Kupp argument, the kind of guy that even though he's really talented, really could be the reason that you lose your league. If you draft Derrick Henry and he busts, gets hurt, you're screwed. And it's just the kind of player that I don't like taking early on because of how much risk is associated with him. Pollard's a guy that I am super excited about. I think $44 is a perfectly fair price to be paying for him. I think you could make a real argument that he belongs inside the top five at the running back position. He's a guy that we saw finish as the running back six last season with Ezekiel Elliott there. He should be getting a lot more goal line work in this offense, and I think that you could see the touchdown numbers really go up for Tony Pollard this season. He's a guy that I have no problem drafting, and he's just not exactly a guy that I'm targeting, but if I can get him for 43, I'm going to do it here. I think he's a really solid asset, a guy that's really going to move the needle for your team, and it really lets you play that hero RB build as well, where you've got a guy that you can build around at the running back position and then not really worry so much about the other or the rest of your running backs because he'll really nice anchor for you. Here's Devontae Adams. That's a really quality option as well. I am a little bit concerned that we could see the touchdown numbers drop for him. I think that we could see this 49ers offense be a little bit worse than what it was last season. I think that, in general, we should see the same kind of target share, the same sort of yardage output, but the touchdowns are something that I would expect to come down for Adams this season. Like I said, I think this Raiders offense is going to take a step back. Not too bad. I think that ESPN's projecting him for 7 touchdowns here. That's half of what he had last year. I think that's a little bit too harsh, but I think he could be like a 10 touchdown kind of guy here and just fall to like that wide receiver 5 to 10 range. Still be a really good player, but just not a top 3 kind of asset like he was last season. Stephon Diggs is a guy that I have ranked ahead of Devontae Adams. I'm super excited about Diggs this season. I know a lot of people are maybe a little bit concerned about his off the field complaints with the team. I'm not concerned about it at all. He's going to be a top 5 wide receiver probably this season, and if you can get him as your wide receiver 1, that's more than great. I think he's going to be an elite asset for your team, and $39 here would be a really great value. That's a bit of a bummer. I'll still go up to the pre-draft value. I'll go to 43. Not going to go higher than that because, like I said, there are guys like Chris Olave that you guys know I want. I'm happy to get CeeDee Lamb or Garrett Wilson as well, but getting Stephon Diggs here is going to feel really nice, my wide receiver 1. So that's a really solid start. I'm really happy about that pick there, and being able to grab Chris Olave next is going to feel really nice. Obviously, though, just because I'm targeting Chris Olave doesn't mean I'm going to not be involved in these guys. Like CeeDee Lamb, I'm willing to pay up to Chris Olave's value here for. I actually have Chris Olave ranked ahead of CeeDee Lamb, so I should be willing to pay the same amount on CeeDee Lamb as I'm willing to pay on Chris Olave, about. So like around here, that's about as high as I'll go. I'm not going to go higher than that because I can get Chris Olave for less, and I think he'll perform better this season. So just because I have a guy ranked higher doesn't mean that I'm going to completely pass on the guys that are being nominated ahead of him. Just in case I do get a value there, maybe there's a little bit of error for me to be wrong as well, and just sort of hedges my bets a little bit while still giving me a really talented player at a discount if it happens. Amon-Ra is another really super exciting player. I don't see myself drafting a ton of him this season, especially if I already have another wide receiver. I think he's a really great like stabilizing presence as your wide receiver 1. And I think he's going to be a really solid asset. I've got really no problem drafting him, but I really do want to be prioritizing him in PPR formats only. If I'm in half PPR or non-PPR formats, I'm just a little bit less excited about him. I don't think he has that 1,500-yard upside, that 12 touchdown ceiling that a lot of the other guys going around him do. So I think he'll be a really consistent asset, a guy that's going to be like a 15, 20 point per game kind of guy for you and be a really nice player to have on your roster, but I don't think he's going to put up very many league winning or week winning weeks, and it's just going to be a really consistent, nice ride for you, but nothing that's really going to be a league winning asset, especially at this price. Here we've got Najee Harris. He's a guy that I've been more and more concerned about over the last several weeks. Jalen Warren looked absolutely fantastic throughout the whole course of preseason. We saw last season that Jalen Warren's a really talented player as well. I think that Warren's got a legitimate shot to take meaningful snaps from Najee Harris. He's probably going to get all the pass catching work in the offense. We'll probably see, 30% of the rush attempts as well. Najee's still going to get the goal line work in this offense, but I think if you're drafting Najee, you really are hoping that he just falls in the end zone 10 or more times, and otherwise it's going to be really tough for him to pay off at this pre-draft value. So another thing that we're seeing too, because of how early he was nominated, everyone left in the draft's got a ton of money left. So we're seeing guys go for more than their pre-draft value. A guy like Najee Harris should not be going for above his pre-draft value by any means. He's a guy that I think really doesn't have much of a ceiling. I'd much rather take guys around him like Ramondre, Jahmyr Gibbs, Aaron Jones, Joe Mixon, guys that cost about the same amount and I think have a lot higher ceiling. And overpaying for Najee Harris seems like a really silly thing to be doing right now. So that's certainly interesting that that happened. Here we go. I'm going to put Olave up right now and just make it happen. Want to make sure I know if I need to be involved in these other wide receivers, sort of like why I nominated A.J. Brown earlier. Olave is definitely my dude. I want to get him on my roster. You guys know that if you've watched my videos, I really want to get him on pretty much all of my teams. He's a guy that I really do expect to put up a top 10 season this year, and if he's your wide receiver too, you are absolutely loaded at the wide receiver position, and he's going to be a really nice guy to have. And obviously, Olave is the kind of guy that I am willing to go up over that pre-draft value just a little bit. I'd be willing to pay upwards of 40 for him even. I think he's just a really quality player. It's the kind of guy I really do want on my roster. I will stop at this point. 38 is going to be as high as I go. That's a pretty significant overpay for a guy like Olave, but I just think he's such a stud. He's going to be a real quality asset, and I have him ranked ahead of Garrett Wilson, who's going for 40. So Olave is a great pick there. I know I overpaid, but I've got no problem spending that on him. So now we've got our two wide receivers set. We're perfectly set there. Like I always say, you should budget $2 per each of your bench spots, $1 for your kicker and defense. So my bench, kicker, and defense is going to cost a total of $16. We have 119 left, so we have $103 to fill the remaining 5 spots. That gives us roughly $21 per player here, and that's just a good thing to keep in the back of your mind, is how much money do you have to spend per roster spot that you've got left. Obviously, I would expect myself to be overpaying a little bit at least one of my running back spots. You guys know I really love guys like Ramondre, Jahmyr Gibbs, and there'd be guys that I'm certainly targeting here. Normally, if you'll see me at the quarterback position, target a guy like Justin Herbert. That's a guy that I love drafting this season. Him being $10 is a really nice way to save a little money here. So let's just say I get Herbert for 10. That gives me $93 for 4 spots. That means I can spend about $24 for a roster spot outside of Herbert. That's going to give me a lot of wiggle room here. It's going to allow me to get Mark Andrews. It's going to allow me to get a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs. It'll allow me to get a nice flex in there. Maybe I can add Miles Sanders, make sure I get a little bit more depth, getting a guy like, you guys know how much I love J.K. Dobbins and how much I love David Montgomery, especially on the ESPN platform. And that's the other thing too that I don't think gets talked about enough with all these mock auction drafts is obviously the mock auction drafts and mocks in general tend to go a lot more chalk than what your home leagues might look like. If you're in a home league, just understand that there are going to be several players throughout the course of the draft that'll go for way more than their pre-draft value, and there will be a couple guys that go for half of their pre-draft value just because you've got the other 10 people in your league zoning out. They maybe aren't interested in the player, they just don't want to be the one to place that bid, and just gotta stay involved, make sure you're on top of things during the entire draft, and you'll really be able to see that if you're focused and really paying attention throughout the entire course of the draft, you're going to be able to grab some really high quality assets. And that's one of the beautiful parts about auction drafts. It's one of my favorite parts is that it does keep you engaged the entire draft and it makes it a lot more fun. So we just saw Devonta Smith go for 36. I think that's perfectly fine, but sort of just like I like to look back and see if I made a good decision here. So I spent 38 on Olave. It was obviously an overpay, but then right after that we saw Garrett Wilson, who I have ranked below Chris Olave, go for 43. We saw Devonta Smith, who I also have ranked below Olave, go for 36. Makes me feel like I really didn't overpay by any means. I think Olave is just underpriced on the ESPN platform, and I think I got him for about a fair value. And then on top of that, I have him ranked significantly higher what a fair value would indicate. So honestly, I think Olave is a really solid pick. I'm really happy I did that. Josh Jacobs just went for $37. Just want to touch on Josh Jacobs a little bit. Now that he's back in Oakland, or Las Vegas, sorry, still getting used to that somehow, even though a few years later. Now that he's back in Las Vegas, I think he's a really safe draft pick. I think you could be drafting him at the end of the first round even. He's probably a round 2 pick in most of your drafts. I think he's a solid player. Probably going to finish as a top 10 running back again this season. Top 5 is certainly in the range of outcomes. There's a little bit of concern with the Raiders' offense, and we could see a potential just downturn from what they were last season. But the fact of the matter is the Raiders were awful last season, and it didn't really impact Josh Jacobs. They're going to run him into the ground. He's on that 1-year deal. The Raiders have no real incentive to try and keep him healthy for anything more than this season. So Josh Jacobs is going to get a ton of work, get the ball thrown to him a lot. We've seen Jimmy G throw the ball to running backs a lot in his past, and it's going to be really great seeing Josh Jacobs get that kind of volume again this season. So I think he's a perfectly fine draft pick, and I've got no problem with it. One that I'm a little bit more concerned with would be Jonathan Taylor. Obviously, there's just a lot of question marks surrounding Jonathan Taylor at the moment. It sounds more and more like he's probably going to get traded at some point this offseason. If he gets traded to the Dolphins, I think he's actually been a real bargain at this draft slot, assuming he's healthy. I'm going to operate under the assumption that he's healthy and it's just been mostly a contract issue. And if that's the case, then Jonathan Taylor is a very screaming value, going as a $35 asset if he ends up as a starting running back on the Dolphins. Or if he ends up as the starter for the Eagles, that's just a really great value there. If he ends up staying in Indianapolis, though, it's a really scary proposition. It's possible that we see him sit out 8 weeks, and that'd be just absolutely catastrophic to his fantasy value. It'd put him as a guy where you're really in a bad spot because you spent a second or a third round draft pick on a guy that's not going to help you for 8 weeks, and that's where the value comes in. So you're just taking a gamble if you draft him. You need to understand that, and just depends on what kind of fantasy player you are. If you're a guy that really wants to target risk and target that upside, then Jonathan Taylor is certainly a player that you should be targeting. And if you're a guy that just wants to play it safe, you're only drafting one team this season, and you just want to make sure that your one team's going to be competitive all season, then Jonathan Taylor is just not the guy for you. Again, now we're seeing Jalen Waddle go for 37. Jalen Waddle is a perfectly fine player. I have him ranked inside my top 15, but he's significantly behind Chris Olave. Again, makes me feel really good about getting Olave for 38. Feels like I got a really good value there. And now here we go with Patrick Mahomes. I know I touched on him as a bust in one of my, not necessarily a bust, but like I think he's going way too high in the snake drafts. His, ADP in a snake draft is around the 15th pick, as to where Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts go at like 22 and 23. That sort of changes for me in auction drafts. As you can see here, their pre-draft values are all basically dead even. At that point, I don't think he's actually a bust. I think that all three of them are about right going at where they're going. And especially in a 10-team league, I would be prioritizing getting a top-tier quarterback or a top-tier tight end. Um, so I have no problem drafting one or the other. I think they're going to be really nice assets for you to have. And I think that Mahomes for $30 in a 10-team league is perfectly okay. I've got no problem doing that. Here we go with Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen's a guy that I am super excited about this season if he can stay healthy. He's going to be a target machine. He's got a legitimate shot to lead the league in receptions this year, and that's not something that you can find this late in drafts very often, but obviously there are age and injury concerns. I tend to find myself just not drafting him that much, and I tend to lean towards drafting a guy like Mike Williams a little bit later, a guy with more week-to-week upside, and a guy that, they've both got their injury concerns, but he costs half as much in an auction draft. He goes 2 or 3 rounds later in snake drafts, and it just makes me feel a lot more comfortable taking a player with those injury concerns if I'm getting him a little bit later in the draft where I don't feel like my team's completely screwed if he goes down. And here we go with Ramondre Stevenson. Ramondre's a guy that I'm super high on. I'm not really concerned at all about the Ezekiel Elliott signing. Zeke's going to steal a few goal line touchdowns this season and be annoying, but like Ramondre only had 5 rushing touchdowns last season. He was still a top 10 running back, and he's going to catch a ton of passes for this team. He is the clear #1 running back in the offense. He's just a really good player. I think that I'm more than fine paying about his pre-draft value for him. I want to generally leave my drafts with him or Jahmyr Gibbs. Because Jahmyr Gibbs is still on the board, I'm not going to overpay for Ramondre because now Ibanez, who's clearly been involved here, won't have that money, although it seems like Tamizio is going to take that money and spend it here. But now Tamizio is going to be out of the running for another running back. Just less competition for a guy like Gibbs, and I do think Gibbs has a slightly higher ceiling this year. But like I said, Ramondre is a perfectly great draft pick. He's going to finish as a top 10 running back, and I think he's going to be a really great asset. So now it's my turn. I generally prefer drafting Mark Andrews to drafting one of the top 3 quarterbacks, and I generally recommend that you don't draft both. So I'm going to be nominating Mark Andrews here because if I don't get Mark Andrews, if he gets bid up way too much, then I'm going to look at guys like Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen. But if I can get Mark Andrews for a reasonable price tag, then I think he's going to be a really quality guy, a guy that I can actually win my league with because I want that difference maker at the quarterback and tight end positions. I want to make sure that, especially in a 10-team league where your roster should all be pretty good, there are only a couple tight ends that can be league-winning assets, and Mark Andrews is one of them. So getting to put him in at my tight end slot is just super useful. It's going to feel really nice being able to play him on a weekly basis. And like I said, I do generally lean against drafting a top-tier quarterback and a top-tier tight end. It just puts you in a bit of a bind with the rest of your roster. it's tough to really diversify that roster and end up with really high caliber assets elsewhere, but that doesn't mean that I won't be involved. Um, Higgins going for too cheap here. I will take him for 25 if he goes there. Him as a flex would be absolutely fantastic. Am I really going to get him? Wow. Okay, so now that that happened, I think I have to punt on the quarterback because I'm not going to be able to fill out my running back slots if I do that. Like I said, I've got $16 budgeted to my bench and defense and kicker. That means I've got $56 to spend on a quarterback and two running backs. That makes it just a little bit too pricey for me to be looking at spending $30 on a quarterback. That would only give me $26 for two running backs. And even though you can make that work, it's just going to put you in a bit of a bind. I don't want your running backs to be that weak. So taking a guy like Mark or like Justin Herbert's going to feel a lot better there, and then I'll have plenty of money left over to get two good running backs. Get a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs, and I can get a guy like James Conner or Madison, then also add in an extra third running back on my bench because I don't want to leave my draft with only two running backs that I trust. There's plenty of guys that I can get for that like $5 range and have a little bit more bet depth there. And on top of that, I'll still have a top tier quarterback, a guy that I'm super excited about, and Justin Herbert if I can do that. DeAndre Swift going for 9 here is absolutely wild. This is Demizio who nominated him. He's clearly coming to the draft with the intention of drafting him, and I've got no problem if you want to get your guy, go ahead and do that, but I really wouldn't recommend spending $9 on DeAndre Swift. It's going to put you in a bit of a bind going into the season. We'll see what Josh Allen goes here for. If he goes for under 25, I will be interested. I just can't see myself really being that interested in spending that much on him because, like I said, I've got $56 left to spend on my starting roster. Spreading that out across three positions, that means I don't want to be putting 26 into my quarterback because it's going to be really tough for me to get the running backs I want. So if a value presents itself like crazy, like Jalen Hurts, then I'm interested, but otherwise I'll probably move on there. Joe Mixon's another guy that I've seen go for significantly below pre-draft value in some home leagues. He's a guy that I think a lot of people are just really out on. They don't want. He's boring. He's been in the league for forever. He's not pretty by any means, but for $20, he's a pick that I'm absolutely making. Um, 21, it's a little hairy. I still want to get Jahmyr Gibbs instead of him, so I'll up to 22 just because Jahmyr Gibbs is a guy that you do see get bid up quite a bit. He's a guy that can easily get out of hand, and I don't want to put myself in a spot where I'm missing out on a tier of running back. I'm not going to pay over that, though. I'll let Joe Mixon go for 23. That's totally fine. Here we've got Travis Etienne. You know, if you've watched a lot of my videos, I've got Etienne on a lot of my bust lists this season. He's just being drafted too high for me. I think that Tank Bigsby is going to play a really integral role in this offense. And even though I think Etienne's a really talented player, I just don't see the touchdown upside if he's going to be losing the goal line work to Tank Bigsby. And the Jaguars have talked quite a bit about not wanting to utilize their running backs in the passing game all that much this season. And if that's the case, you've got a running back who's not going to catch passes and not going to score touchdowns. It's hard to be super relevant for fantasy if that's the case. Deebo Samuel, I think, is it's an interesting pick. He's a guy that obviously has upside. We saw him finish the wide receiver 2 in fantasy just 2 seasons ago. He's a really good player. It's just a little bit too early for me. I'm worried that he is the number 2 in that offense behind Brandon Ayuk, who's looked really good this preseason. Obviously, Brock Purdy does love Deebo Samuel. He's thrown the ball to him a ton, and Deebo did lead the team in target share last season when Purdy was the quarterback, but it's just a little bit scary for me to spend $22 on the guy with that kind of injury history and who's coming off of a pretty down year last year. Here's Jalen Hurts. I'll go up to about 25 on him. I think he's a really nice asset to have, and it's an incentive to have him in a 10-team league for sure. So I'm willing to go up to a little bit, knowing that it's going to hurt my running back room, but I'm not going to put myself in a spot where I won't be able to get two running backs I like. But if I get him for 22, oof, I really thought it might happen there. All right, 25 is going to be my max bid there. Can't go up to 26. It's just a little bit too early for me to be doing that because I know that I still like Justin Herbert a ton. Think he's going to be a really quality asset for me later on, and if I can get him for 26 or for 10 later, it's really going to allow me to build out a much better running back room than what I'd be looking at otherwise. Christian Watson's an interesting guy. I do think that he's going to have a much better season than what he had last season. My concern would just be that I think the target share is actually going to be a little slanted towards Romeo Dobbs here. Romeo Dobbs was not playing when Christian Watson really broke out onto the scene last year, and Romeo Dobbs has gotten a lot of hype this offseason as well as offseason, and he played well early on last season as well, really well for a rookie, and he looks good. I think Romeo Dobbs is going to be a thing. He's going to be arguably the target leader in this Packer offense. $13 makes a lot of sense for Christian Watson, though, but I think that I just don't want to overpay too much for Christian Watson because I think you could be looking at the kind of guy that ends up putting up Gabe Davis numbers where he'll either catch a bomb 50-yard touchdown or get 4 targets for 30 yards and just be a guy that's a bit of a disappointment. So you guys know how much I love Jahmyr Gibbs. I've talked about him quite a bit. I do believe that David Montgomery is the better value, but I'll go up to 25 on Gibbs. That'll be it. I'm not going to go higher because there's still plenty of other running backs I like. Um, I don't want to put myself in a spot where I only have one good running back by putting up too much money here, and I still want to prioritize getting one of those top 8 quarterbacks. And if I do this, it could put me in a spot where I can't get Justin Herbert. So even though it's early, I'm going to put Justin Herbert up. Again, it's just a difference-making, strategy deciding pick here. So I want to make sure that I can get Herbert on my roster, make sure that I know what I have left to budget for my running backs, because this is a thing that's actually kind of a priority for me, is getting one of these top tier quarterbacks. And you guys know after all the videos you've probably watched just how high I am on Herbert. I think he can legitimately be the quarterback one this season. So getting him $1 off would have been really nice, but Chun just wouldn't allow it. So here we go, $11, totally fine. I'd be willing to go up to even 15 here. I think he's just a really great asset. God dang. Chun's really deciding whether or not he wants him, but $13 is still totally fine. It's half of what we saw the other quarterbacks go for in Hurts, Allen, and Mahomes. And oh my God. Wow. Okay, well now he's up to 16. That's interesting. I'm going to do 17. It's going to put me in a bad spot if I don't get him. It's going to be, I know it feels bad doing this, but oh my God. Okay. I think I'm doing it. 19. I know. Jesus. Mm. Okay. I got to let him go. So I'm not going to have a top tier quarterback. I'm probably looking at getting a guy like Trevor Lawrence here, and that's totally fine. I'm going to make sure I get a couple really good running backs now. I can probably look at a guy like getting Dameon Pierce, Miles Sanders, and another running back. I'll have an extra depth piece. Just didn't want to truly handicap my team that much by paying double for Justin Herbert. As much as I love Herbert, he's not worth 21 when Josh Allen and Hurts and stuff are going for the mid-20s. Just doesn't make sense to really spend up that much for a guy that, as much as I think he can finish as the quarterback one, I don't think it's fair to pay that kind of price tag for him. So yeah, we just saw Calvin Ridley go for $23. I think Calvin Ridley's like the perfect flex option. I don't really want to be relying on him on a weekly basis, just because I think he could have a pretty volatile year. He's clearly a really talented wide receiver, and I do like him quite a bit. I think he's perfectly capable where he's being drafted, and I don't hate it. But if he's your wide receiver 3, I like it a lot more than if he's your wide receiver 2, just because that kind of player with that much sort of variability in what his range of outcomes is going to be the kind of guy that I don't want to necessarily be coming into the season needing to hit for my team to be okay. So he's just a little bit of a risky pick, but if you can get him as your wide receiver 3, I think he's a great asset. Aaron Jones for me is really similar to Joe Mixon, just a guy who's been around the block, been useful year after year, and just people are sort of tired of. Um, I don't want to overpay for him, and it's not something I'm going to do here. There's still plenty of wide receiver running backs left that I like. Not going to put myself in a spot where I have to force him onto my roster, even though things are just we're running out of running backs here, but there's still enough left that I like. Here's Lamar. I think Lamar is going to be perfectly good this season. Probably good, not great, is where I have him ranked. I think he's a top 8 quarterback for me, but I think he might be my 8th highest ranked quarterback. He's just a guy that I think he's going to run a little bit less this season. They're going to try and throw it quite a bit more. And I think J.K. Dobbins finally being healthy is going to put them in a spot where when they get toward the goal line, they're not going to want to use Lamar as much as what they have in the past. You're going to see probably that touchdown upside on the ground get dropped down. And maybe he'll throw for 30 touchdowns this year. It'll be really great for him. So he's got that upside, but he's just not a guy that I'd much rather have Herbert on my team. And normally Herbert's such a much cheaper asset. Amari Cooper's a really quality player again this season. I think he's kind of perennially underrated and ends up putting just like up high end wide receiver two numbers. I think we can kind of expect that out of him again this season. And I think he's a perfectly fine value where he's being drafted. I find myself drafting him every now and then on my teams. DeAndre Hopkins is someone that I find myself not drafting at all. He's just a guy that I think is pretty much up here just because of name recognition. He's going to be in a really low passing volume offense. He's got some competition for targets between Chiga Okonkwo and Traylon Burks once Traylon Burks is healthy. And like I said, it's just going to be a really low passing volume offense. It's still going to run through Derrick Henry. And I think paying up for Hopkins is just something that you're doing to get right name recognition on your roster and not really making your roster that much better. Here we've got Justin Fields. Justin Fields is like my 10th ranked quarterback right now, and I actually had to move him up ahead of guys that I have projected for more points. Obviously, he's got that league winning upside and could easily be the quarterback one this season, but just watching him throw the ball this preseason, I don't really think he's any better of a quarterback than he was last season. Obviously, he could run for 1,400 yards this season and then be a guy that it doesn't matter how many yards he's throwing for, but I don't want to bet on a historical rushing output from a quarterback. It's just something that obviously it's in the range of outcomes, but I'm not going to ever really bet on a player breaking NFL records. So because of that, I just don't find myself drafting Justin Fields all that often. Here we've got Mike Evans. Mike Evans is a guy that I really just don't find myself drafting much of either. I think it's going to be a scenario where the Bucks offense is really going to struggle to put points on the board, and the upside case for Mike Evans pretty much every year has just been how volatile his touchdown production can be. He's a guy that's always put up high-end touchdown numbers, and honestly, he's had several seasons over 10 touchdowns, and yeah, he's probably going to have over 1,000 yards again this season. That's just what he does. He's Mike Evans, and that's who he is at this point. But I don't really see a world where the Buccaneers are scoring enough that 10 touchdowns in the range of outcomes for Evans, and if that's the case, I just don't see the ceiling, and you're drafting him to be a starter for you, so I just don't really see it working out this season. Dameon Pierce is someone that I've risen on quite a bit over the last several weeks. I was worried coming into the offseason that we were going to see Devin Singletary really take a lot of touches off away from Dameon Pierce, and what we've seen in the training camp and preseason usage so far is that Dameon Pierce is their workhorse running back. Obviously, it's not ideal if he's your running back one. You want to make sure you've got a roster like what I've built here, where you've got three stud wide receivers and a stud tight end, and then you can sort of overcome that. So I'm okay doing what I did there. It's just something that I would make note of that and understand that Dameon Pierce is an okay running back one for you guys if you are sure that you've got a really stud team elsewhere. And you guys know how I feel about David Montgomery. I'm willing to pay up to about 10 for him. He's just a guy that I'm super excited about, a guy that I really think is going to be a top 15 running back this year, and I am getting him pretty much everywhere. He's a guy that I want to leave pretty much all of my drafts with. And I don't have any problem drafting him and Jahmyr Gibbs either. I think it's a safe pick. You're probably going to be okay. You might even be okay playing both of them every single week, and if one of them goes down, the other one just becomes that much better, so it's not really that risky to roster both of them either. So now we've got $49 left. That does mean that technically we've got $33 for a quarterback if we want to do it. I'm not going to overpay here for my quarterback. I'm probably just going to take Trevor Lawrence, a guy that I'm happy with, and then I'll just add some more depth at my bench. It's going to be a deeper team than I came into it planning on having, but I want to have a little bit of depth, sort of take that shotgun approach at running back with this dead zone area and make sure that I'm getting enough guys that I can count on one or two of them hitting, and because I don't really need to worry about wide receiver room at this point. I've got three guys that I'm going to be starting every single week. Just want to make sure I have 4 or 5 running backs that are competent enough that I'm happy with them, and saving that money at the quarterback position is going to allow me to do that. And honestly, Trevor Lawrence has got the upside to be a league-winning guy as well, so no problem with it if he ends up being my quarterback one. Hawkinson's interesting right now. He's been sort of just having a really strange offseason. He missed most of training camp with an ear infection, and now he's got lower back stiffness. There's just some concern there. I still think he's going to finish as a top 5 tight end, but I am worried that we could see him really just not blow up the way he maybe could have if he actually got that consistent time with the team. That's sort of what he lacked last year after having been traded to the Vikings midseason. But Hawkinson's still a really safe pick. I just think he's fallen behind Darren Waller for me now, a guy that I think has more upside. So he's my tight end 5 now, behind obviously Kelsey and Andrews. Then you guys know I love Goddard and Waller now. So Hawkinson's a guy that I don't find myself drafting all that much, even though I think he's a pretty safe draft pick. I do like Deontay Johnson quite a bit, especially in PPR formats. I think the Steelers are going to be a more pass-heavy team than what I was initially projecting coming into the offseason, just because it looks like Kenny Pickett has taken that step forward. Deontay's a perfectly fine pick. Because I've got 3 wide receivers that I love, though, I just didn't want to really target him, even though he went for a value, because he's not going to crack my starting lineup here. And I still think that I could get another running back that could crack my starting lineup. Obviously, Pierce and Montgomery are solid, but there are plenty of guys that have upside above those guys, and I want to make sure that I'm drafting guys that are more likely to crack my starting lineup at this point than just grabbing another nice depth piece at the wide receiver position. If this were a 3 wide receiver league, though, I definitely would have been in on Deontay there. Rashad White's another interesting one. I think that he's obviously got upside to be a top 10 running back this season if things really break well for him. He's going to need to catch 60, 70 passes for that to happen, and I don't really see that happening. I think he's probably going to be just like a low end running back, too. He's a guy that, again, the Buccaneers are going to be a bad offense. It's going to be a little dirty, but for $8, I got to do it. I'll go up to 10. I'm not going to go any higher. Okay, there we go. But yeah, he's just gonna be a guy that you can play pretty much every single week, especially in PPR formats. I don't know what the touchdown upside for him is, just because of the touchdown overall volume on this offense. But I don't think there's any real challenge for him to get goal line work in this offense. He's a guy that should be the running back 1. Really could get workhorse numbers, workhorse production. Sean Tucker's a little concerning. He's a talent that I like, who just had a heart condition that made him undrafted in the NFL draft. But really no true concern about him. I think Rashad White's just a pretty safe low end running back 2 for you guys to draft. George Kittle's someone I find myself not drafting any of. His career high in touchdowns over the course of his career was like 6 heading into last season. Somehow he just blew up with 11 touchdowns. He had like a 4-week stretch with 7. I just don't see that happening again this season. He's going to be a touchdown dependent tight end, and there are a lot of touchdown dependent tight ends, so I don't see the value in spending that much early capital on a guy that isn't really going to be all that much better than a guy like Gerald Everett. That was a little harsh saying not much better than Gerald Everett, but you guys got the point. Terry McLaurin is another guy that I'm just a little bit concerned about. I think that there is a legitimate case to be made that Dotson could pass him on the depth chart this season. He's a guy that obviously McLaurin's a stud. He's a really talented wide receiver, but the turf toe injury could linger into the season. Terry McLaurin's status is up in the air for week 1, and if Dotson really takes a stranglehold on that wide receiver 1 role, obviously this Commander offense I think is going to be better than what we saw last season. Howell looks like he's the guy. I think he's going to be a really good quarterback for them, and maybe he can support 2 wide receivers, but I'd rather just take a Dotson at value than take Terry McLaurin here. So Alvin Kamara is an interesting guy here for me, especially with the current roster I build. I have a team that sort of needs that upside shot at the running back position. If I can get Kamara for cheap, like less than 10, I'm definitely interested in that, just because he's a guy that he's got legitimate top 10 upside for me at the running back position. A guy that okay, I'll go to 12 just because I really do think he's going to be a nice guy on my roster. A guy that, because I got the 2 running backs there, I can hold on for those 3 weeks. Okay, I'm going to pass here though. Don't want to overpay for him because I still think there are other running backs that I like quite a bit, and I'm not sold on him being a league winner or a difference maker. So Miles Sanders is another running back you guys know I love. I'll be looking to grab him here. I think he's going to be a really nice compliment. He'd probably start for me over David Montgomery to start the season here. A guy that a lot of people are just sort of shying away from because he's a Panther now, and I get it, but he's a good player. He's going to get a lot of work for them. He'll probably catch a lot of passes, and getting him for $10 here would be an absolute bargain. He's a guy that I am very excited about this season, a guy that does legitimately have top 10 upside at the running back position, and if he's your running back 3 or even 2, I think you're totally fine there. So that was great. We've got $39 left. We got 6 bench spots, 2 there, so then we got basically Let's see, $14 between our kicker, defense, and bench. 25 for the quarterback. We're not going to spend 25 on the quarterback. We'll probably spend 10 on the quarterback at most here. Means we've got enough money to spend 9 on James Conner. James Conner is another running back that I like quite a bit. A guy that I think is going to have a really good year. And dang it. Okay, I won't overpay for him. I still want to grab J.K. Dobbins here. He's a guy that I like quite a bit. And on ESPN, you just really should be drafting J.K. Dobbins. He's going for $5 on most platform or most formats right now. That's insane for a guy that does have legitimate top 10 upside of the position. Kenneth Walker's interesting. I think if you go running back heavy, he's an okay guy. I want him to be my running back 3 if I'm drafting him because I think that obviously he's got a really wide range of outcomes. I'll spend $9 on him. I won't go higher. He could be a top 10 running back this season. He could just absolutely beat out Charbonnet for the role, be a guy that ends up being a monster for them this season. But he could also be a guy that ends up losing touches. Oh, okay, I wanted him for 9. Not going to pay 11 though. So just interesting to look at there. Walker's a guy I think, like I said, if he's your running back 3 or 4, he's a perfect running back for your roster. But if you need him to start every week, it's someone that I'm a little scared to be drafting. Madison's another guy. I think he's going to be really solid this season. I have him on one of my home league teams. I got him overpaid a little bit for him as well, but I think he's going to be a solid asset. I'm not going to overpay, but I'll go to 10. Just a guy that, again, you can plug and play, be pretty happy with in your running back spot there. And again, like I said, because I sort of pass on those top tiers of running backs, and I know I'm going to beat in a cheap quarterback, I can pretty much take the shotgun approach at these dead zone running backs, get 4 of them. Between these 4 guys, 2 of them are going to hit and be really good for me, and that's going to mean that I've got a really solid roster, even if 2 of them end up being busts. So that's sort of my approach. If that kind of thing happens and I end up with extra money, that's where I sort of allocate it, is trying to get just more high-end potential candidates for my running back room. Kyle Pitts is another interesting one. Obviously, the upside's insane for him just because of the talent, but I'm really concerned about this Falcons offense. They're going to be extremely run heavy. I haven't seen really anything out of Desmond Ritter to believe that Ritter is going to be a significant upgrade over what they had in Mariota last season, and that just makes me not really draft Kyle Pitts anywhere. I don't want to be dealing with the headache of having spent that much capital on a tight end and feeling like I have to play him every single week and him just end up just being an absolute disaster. Cam Akers is another one of these dead zone running backs that I'd be willing to take here. I view him pretty much the same as a guy like Alexander Madison. I'm not going to take him here though, just because I've got 4 now, and I want to be getting myself a little bit more depth at wide receiver. I want to make sure that I can get at quarterback too. I don't want to save money until I get Trevor Lawrence, just to make sure that I have him there and I'm not putting myself in a bad spot. Mike Williams is a guy that I would be interested in here. He's obviously a really nice boomer bust sort of option to have in your flex. I'll pay up to 7. I'm not going to go to 9. Um, just wanted to put my foot in the water there. He's a guy that really will have some week winning performances for you guys, and if he ends up being your flex, I think that's the perfect guy to put in there because he can be so boom or bust and really just put a stranglehold on you for a week. Here we go. We got Trevor Lawrence. See if Derrickson, who nominated him, has a quarterback yet. He doesn't. So we got to be prepared to overpay here. I'll go up to 10 just because I need him. Derrickson's probably thinking about it. He'll probably outbid me here. I'll have to go to 8. But if I get him for 6, that's great. I'll have 23 bucks left for the rest of my team. Dang it. Okay, I'll go to 8. That's as high as I'm going. I won't go past that. Just want to make sure I've got enough money left to really fill out the rest of my roster here. There we go. That's very nice. Now I've got $21. It's time to sort of start digging deep. We got to go $3 per bench guy, so we're running out of money here pretty quick, but that's totally fine. Now we're just looking at flex spots. James Cook's another guy. He's got a ton of upside this season. Could easily finish the top 10 running back. Obviously, I am worried he's not going to get that goal line work. I think that Damian Harris and Latavius Murray are going to end up splitting that, and then Josh Allen's going to be the goal line back on top of that. So the upside's not really there for me in a realistic sense, unless he catches a ton of passes or breaks off a ton of long runs. But I do like the pick. I think he's a great running back 3 to have on your roster. I just don't want to need him on a weekly basis. And it's my turn to nominate a player. I'm going to go down a little deeper here, try and nominate Zay Flowers. I'm willing to spend 3 on him. He's just a guy that I'm really excited about, a guy that I think is going to have a really great second half of the season, and um, really love the value of him at $2. He's just a guy that I'm super excited about, and want to get my first bench wide receiver here as well. Very nice. We got him there. That's great. So we just got to get 4 more bench spots here, and then we'll close out the video. I won't make you guys watch me get a kicker and defense because that's a waste of my time and your time. Speaking of kickers, though, or defenses, a couple defenses I think are good ads if you want to be looking at guys. The Saints are my favorite defense to pick. They've got a really great start to the schedule. I think you can pretty much use them for each of the first 6 weeks, so they'd be my number one defense to add. Outside of the Saints, I think that the Jaguars are actually a really quality pick, even though their defense isn't that great. They open the season up against the Indianapolis Colts, who probably won't have Jonathan Taylor for week 1 at this point, and I think it's safe to say that Anthony Richardson in his first game ever is probably going to make some mistakes. I generally want to be targeting young rookie quarterbacks in their early outings and just sort of capitalize on those. So Jaguars are going to be a great week 1 streaming option for you guys as well, although just know that they do play the Kansas City Chiefs week 2. So you're not using the Jaguars for week 2. If Jerry Judy ends up going really cheap, if I can get him for 4, I think that's perfectly fine. He's a guy that obviously he's got a ton of upside at the position. He's just another guy. I don't want to be drafting him and needing him because there's a lot of concern there that he could miss up to a month potentially into the season. The Broncos did cut Kendall Hinton today at their wide receiver position. That just means a little bit to me in that maybe they're not as concerned about Jerry Judy's injury as we are, just because I don't think you would be cutting a receiver who has played some meaningful snaps for you if you were genuinely concerned about the health of your other ones. Um, just a thought there. Marquise Brown's a guy that I have cooled on quite a bit. I loved him at the start of the offseason, but the Cardinals actually waived Colt McCoy today. They cut him from the roster. Looks like Joshua Dobbs is going to be the starting quarterback for the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals seem like they're doing pretty much everything in their power to tank without openly admitting they're tanking, and that does concern me for a guy like Marquise Brown, who honestly I wouldn't be shocked if Marquise Brown is traded at the deadline as well. Just could be a lot of volatility. I think you could see him sort of in a situation like what you saw with Brandon Cooks last year, where he's a really good player, but just really not in a good team, not on a team that's trying to win and ends up winning out halfway through the season. It's actually a really good comp. I hadn't really thought of that until just now on the air, but I think that Brandon Cooks last season and Marquise Brown this season could end up being really similar comparisons. Isaiah Pacheco for $5 to me is completely fine. I am concerned that in Kansas City it's going to be just a 3-headed backfield. I think McKinnon's obviously going to dominate the pass catching work. Isaiah Pacheco is going to probably be the lead down back on what's first and second down, but CEH is still on the roster. He's going to factor in some, and I think it's going to be really muddy there. So I don't draft much of Pacheco, but I have no problem drafting him if you're in a spot where you just do need to find a running back and he's on the board. Tyler Lockett's another really great value this season. He always is. I'm willing to go up to 5 here. I'm too poor to be really spending too much more, but if I can get him for 5, I'm interested. All right, I'll back off there. Just a couple other wide receivers I really like. I really like guys like Jordan Addison, who you guys know I've talked about a ton. Um, Want to grab Quentin Johnston as well, potentially. I love just stacking up on these rookies late in the draft. They're guys that I think are going to blow up over the second half of the season, and especially with my current 3 wide receiver build, I don't need them. So that's the perfect spot to be in with these rookies and guys that can take a step forward and crack your starting roster later, or be really great trade bait, but not guys that you need to deal with the growing pains of early on in the season. Brandon Ayuk's another guy that I am excited about this season. I think he's probably the wide receiver 1 for the Niners this year, and J.K. Dobbins is someone who I am extremely interested in his pre-draft value right now. I think he's got a legitimate shot to be a top 10 running back. I drafted him in my home league just yesterday, and I think he's going to be a really nice asset. And at his price on ESPN, he's just somebody that I find myself leaving almost every draft with. He's a stud. He's going to be really good this season. And again, with my current running back build, he's a guy that could crack my starting lineup, and that's awesome to have. Next up, we got Jordan Addison here. Obviously nominating him. You guys know how high I am on him, and if I can get him and Zay Flowers on all of my teams, I absolutely love that. And him as my wide receiver five is fantastic because I'm never going to start him early on in the season. And while he really comes into his own, eventually takes over that clear number two role in Minnesota, he's going to be a stud the second half of the season. And getting him to just comfortably rest on my bench while I build up the rest of my lineup is going to be super great. So now I've got $9 to spend on two more players. I'll go up to five here on Drake London. I'm not super excited about him actually, but at this point I'm just looking for some upside at the wide receiver position. He's a guy that I think could take a step forward this year if the Falcons are any better than they need to be. Again, Drake London's a guy I don't need on this roster. He's a guy that could actually be really useful for me as well. So I'll take him. And the last guy I'm going to be looking to target at is going to be Jahan Dotson. So if I can get Dotson for four, that'd be great. And then I'll have that $1 for the kicker and defense. So I'll have a much deeper team than I generally go into my draft trying to get. Normally I try and get a little bit more star power, but I love my wide receivers and my tight ends, and I think I've got enough put together really quality running backs, and quarterback's going to be just solid with Trevor Lawrence there, although I kind of wish I'd maybe just paid up and gotten a really good guy in Herbert and just dealt with a slightly worse bench. If I can get Christian Kirk for four as well, though, I'm interested in that. I'll bid three. If I don't get him, that's fine, but if I can get him, I'm happy about it. That's fine. I just think Christian Kirk's got a really solid floor this year. He's probably going to be a nice guy that you can play in a pinch, and especially in PPR formats. It's just a nice guy to have on your roster. Especially with all the, you could argue, uncertainty in my bench wide receivers right now. I've got my three studs up top, but then I've got Flowers, Addison, and London. None of them are guarantees by any means to be great this season, so it would be nice to have a little stabilizing force. But that's generally how I like to build it. Once I have the guys that I'm locked into my starting lineup with, I want to go with guys with high upside, guys that I think could break my starting lineup, and guys that are going to be real difference makers, not just guys that I think are going to be, yay, I got a wide receiver three on my bench. It's like I want a guy that could really break out and be a difference maker over the course of the season. Evan Ingram's a perfectly fine value. I don't find myself drafting much of him just because I like spending a couple more dollars to get Dallas Goedert, or I just find myself waiting and getting guys like Sam Laporta, Chega Conquo, Dalton Kincaid. Um, I think Pat Fryermuth is a good value as well. David and Njoku's another guy I like quite a bit. So Evan Ingram doesn't end up being one of my favorite tight end targets, but he's perfectly fine where he's going. I've got no complaint there. So we just saw Dalvin Cook go for $4 as well. I think he's a perfectly capable draft pick. Definitely going to be like a running back two to start the season for you guys. So if you want to get a guy that maybe you want to pair him with an Alvin Kamara and you spend $20 on the two total, you got a guy that's going to hold you over until Kamara comes back, and then when Kamara comes back, it'll likely just start for you over Dalvin Cook. So Dalvin Cook's a great like early season rental, and even later on in the season, I think he can still be a flex asset for you guys. So $4 is a perfectly fine draft value. We're just seeing teams dominate kickers and defenses now. Kind of a waste of everyone's time, but whatever people want to do, they're more than welcome to. If you want to do that, it's kind of an easy win in an auction draft. You want to nominate a kicker or a defense early on. You either get a kicker or a defense for $1 that's really good, or you make somebody else spend more than $1 on a kicker or a defense. So it is a win-win regardless of what you want to do there, but it's just not something I find myself doing. It's just kind of a boring early draft pick, early auction strategy, and not something that I find really moves the needle for anybody. So we get to nominate next. I'll be nominating Jahan Dotson. Hopefully I get him for the $4, and then we'll get out of here. So really fun making these videos. I've got my, like I said, I got my big money auction league tonight. So wish me luck in that one. Hopefully I'll keep you guys updated with how my teams go as well. So really enjoy making these videos. I find it's really helpful to get all that practice in as well, and just having a lot of fun doing this. So yeah. And like I said earlier at the beginning of the video, if you guys do want, I'd be happy to do like a rating your team's video for you guys. So feel free to submit your rosters, any of the drafts you have. I'd be happy to sort of rate them, provide feedback on what I would do going forward, and might make a video. If I get at least 10 submissions, I'll make a video on that. I think I have several that I've sort of responded to in the comments already, but I could go in a little more in depth and do a video on that as well. So there we go. We got Dotson. That'll finish out being our roster. So really like this team. I think it's a little bit deeper than I would have planned it on it being, and I would have preferred to get maybe just a higher end quarterback, or maybe spend a little bit more money on my starting running backs because of how much depth we ended up with. We didn't quite need all of that, but overall I'd probably get like a B plus, A minus. Just to give you guys the rundown, our quarterback's going to be Trevor Lawrence. Our running backs are Dameon Pierce, David Montgomery, Miles Sanders, Alexander Madison, and J.K. Dobbins. And our receivers are Stephon Diggs, Chris Olave, T. Higgins, Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, Drake London, and Jahan Dotson. And then our tight end's going to be Mark Andrews. So really solid team. A couple holes here and there. I think our running back room's a little bit weak. We're just going to have to hope some of those dead zone guys pan out. And then hopefully Trevor Lawrence can really take that step forward, or we might be a little bit behind the 8 ball at the quarterback position. So yeah, really enjoyed making this video. If it's your first time on the channel, I want to thank you so much for stopping by. I'd love it if you'd subscribe to the channel. If you want more content like this, there will be videos every single day throughout the course of the rest of the off season. Several videos a week helping you guys throughout the regular season. And I'll be here all year to help you guys win your leagues. So please do subscribe to the channel if you haven't. We hit 750 subscribers today, which is incredible. I'd love to hit 1,000 as soon as possible, just because that's a super cool milestone. If you've already subscribed, please do just like the video, give it a thumbs up. It really helps with the algorithm, helps you know that I'm doing a good job, and really helps you know that I should keep making videos like this. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching the video, and I'll catch you next time. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.